When my son asked me to join him for dinner with his wife's family, he said softly, "Mom, please keep it simple tonight." Simple. That single word cut deeper than he knew. So I put on my oldest dress, the one with wrinkles time refused to iron out. I wore the shoes I'd fixed twice and a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Because that night, I wasn't just a mother going to dinner. I was a woman testing the price of respect. They saw a broke, naive widow. What they didn't see was the woman who once signed contracts that built half the city. And before the night was over, they would learn what real wealth sounds like. When silence finally decides to speak, if you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. Evelyn Carter pressed the elevator button for the 32nd floor. The brass gleamed under soft lighting. Her reflection showed a woman who had run boardrooms for 30 years. Tonight, however, she wore a thrift store dress, navy blue with tiny flowers. The fabric felt thin against her skin. The restaurant occupied the entire floor. River North spread below like scattered diamonds. White tablecloths caught the candlelight. No prices appeared on the leather-bound menus. Evelyn knew this place charged more for appetizers than most families spent on groceries. She spotted Marcus immediately. Her son stood near the host station, checking his phone. At 35, he still had the nervous energy of a college student. His wife Simone waited beside him. Product marketing had taught her to present herself well. Tonight she wore a black dress that cost more than Evelyn's monthly pension. But it was the older couple that drew Evelyn's attention. Veronica Hughes commanded space like a real estate queen. Her blonde hair swept back in perfect waves. Diamond earrings caught every light. Franklin Hughes stood with his chest out, surveying the room as if he owned it. Scottsdale money carried itself differently than Chicago money. Marcus spotted her first. His face brightened, then flickered with something else. Concern, maybe, or embarrassment. "Mom, you made it." He kissed her cheek. The gesture felt rehearsed. "Wouldn't miss it." Evelyn's voice carried warmth, but her eyes took inventory. Simone stepped forward with her marketing smile. "Mrs. Carter, you look comfortable." The word hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn had worn $1,000 suits to merger meetings. Tonight, she'd chosen $15 polyester. The test had begun. "Evelyn, dear." Veronica's voice dripped honey over steel. "How wonderful to finally meet Marcus's mother." They shook hands. Veronica's grip lasted exactly 2 seconds. Professional courtesy, nothing more. Franklin offered a broader smile. "Marcus talks about you all the time." "Said you worked in operations?" 30 years. Evelyn kept her answer short. "Oh, how nice." Veronica's tone suggested otherwise. "Those support roles are so important." Support roles. Evelyn had overseen budgets larger than small countries. She'd negotiated contracts that made headlines. But tonight she nodded politely. The hostess led them to a corner table. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Chicago skyline. Lake Michigan stretched toward the horizon, dark and endless. Marcus pulled out Evelyn's chair. His hands trembled slightly. She'd raised him to be nervous about disappointing people. Sometimes that was a blessing. Sometimes it was a curse. The sommelier appeared with wine suggestions. Franklin waved him away and ordered a bottle that cost more than Evelyn's electric bill. The gesture was meant to impress. It succeeded, but not in the way he intended. Conversation flowed like expensive wine. Veronica talked about their Scottsdale house, the pool renovation, the country club. Franklin mentioned his latest property acquisitions. Numbers flew across the table like small birds. Then Veronica turned to Evelyn. "Marcus mentioned you're on a fixed income now?" The question arrived with surgical precision. Evelyn felt Marcus tense beside her. Simone studied her salad as if it contained ancient secrets. "Retirement has its adjustments," Evelyn said. "Oh, I'm sure." Veronica's smile never wavered. "We were just telling Marcus how important it is for young couples to focus on their future. Without distractions." Distractions. The word hit like a small slap. Evelyn had helped Marcus through college, supported him through his startup years, celebrated every promotion, every raise, every small victory. Franklin leaned forward. "We've been thinking about setting up an allowance. Nothing dramatic. Just enough so Marcus doesn't have to worry about family obligations." The table went quiet. Even the restaurant noise seemed to fade. Marcus stared at his hands. Simone found something fascinating in her wine glass. Family obligations? Evelyn understood now. She wasn't a beloved grandmother-to-be. She was a line item in someone else's budget. "A problem to be managed with monthly payments? That's very thoughtful," she said. Her voice carried no anger, no hurt, just polite acknowledgement. She'd learned long ago that the most dangerous opponents were the ones who never raised their voices. The waiter returned. Veronica took charge immediately. For Mrs. Carter, something modest. She scanned the menu. Perhaps the soup and salad? Not a question. An assignment. Evelyn had negotiated billion-dollar deals, but tonight she was being assigned soup and salad. That sounds perfect, Evelyn said. Marcus finally looked up. Mom, you can order whatever you want. I know, sweetheart. She patted his hand. But Mrs. Hughes has excellent taste. The comment carried multiple meanings. Veronica caught one of them. Her smile tightened at the edges. Dinner proceeded with careful civility. Franklin told stories about difficult tenants. Veronica shared gossip from the country club. Marcus and Simone provided nervous laughter at appropriate moments. But Evelyn was taking notes. Mental files opened and closed. Veronica's condescending tone toward the waiter. Franklin's casual mention of avoiding taxes. The way they spoke about their cleaning lady. She watched Marcus try to navigate between worlds. Her shy, brilliant son, who'd built software that helped companies track inventory across continents. Tonight, he looked 12 years old again. The main courses arrived. Evelyn's soup was perfectly adequate. She ate slowly, listening to Franklin explain why poor people made poor choices. Veronica nodded along, occasionally adding her own observations about personal responsibility. They were performing for her, showing her where she fit in their family hierarchy. The message was clear, know your place. Evelyn smiled and took another spoonful of soup. She'd spent 3 decades reading people across conference tables. Tonight's performance was particularly revealing. By dessert, the campaign was in full swing. Subtle comments about aging alone, gentle suggestions about assisted living communities, caring questions about her health insurance. Each comment was wrapped in false concern. Death by 1,000 small cuts. Marcus grew quieter as the evening progressed. Simone kept glancing between her parents and her mother-in-law. The tension stretched thin as piano wire. Finally, Franklin delivered the closing argument. We just want everyone to be comfortable. Marcus shouldn't have to choose between his future and his past. His past. Evelyn had become ancient history while she wasn't looking. You're very kind, she said. The check arrived. Franklin made a show of paying with a platinum card. Another message delivered. Outside, they waited for the valet to bring their cars. The October air carried hints of winter. Soon, the lake would freeze. Ice would cover everything until spring. Marcus hugged her goodbye. Thanks for coming, Mom. Thank you for including me. She meant it, but not in the way he thought. Veronica offered her hand again. So lovely to meet you, Evelyn. We'll have to do this again sometime. Sometime. The word had no weight, no commitment. It meant never. Evelyn's small Honda arrived first. The valet looked surprised. In this neighborhood, cars usually cost more than houses. She drove home slowly, processing the evening. Her apartment building stood modest and quiet in Lincoln Park. No doorman, no marble lobby. Just home. In her kitchen, she made tea and sat at her small table. Outside, the city hummed with late-night energy. Young people laughed on sidewalks. Couples walked hand in hand. She opened her laptop and began typing. 30 years in operations had taught her to document everything. Tonight deserved careful documentation. The file was labeled simply Exhibit A. She'd been tested tonight, judged and found wanting by people who confused money with worth. They'd shown her their true faces, believing she was powerless to respond. They were wrong about many things, but they were especially wrong about that. Evelyn saved the file and closed the laptop. Tomorrow she would begin her research. The Hughes family had just declared war without realizing it. She sipped her tea and smiled. The dessert plates had been cleared away. Coffee arrived in delicate porcelain cups. Steam rose like tiny prayers in the candlelight. The waiter set down small chocolate truffles with each serving. Evelyn noticed how he hesitated before placing her cup. His eyes flicked to Veronica for approval. Merci beaucoup, Veronica said to the waiter. Her accent was terrible, but her confidence was absolute. The young man nodded and retreated. Evelyn caught the micro-expression that crossed his face. Embarrassment, maybe. Or pity. We should probably discuss the practical matters, Franklin said. He adjusted his Rolex as he spoke. The gesture looked casual, but Evelyn recognized it as positioning. Like a peacock displaying its tail, Veronica leaned forward slightly. Her diamond tennis bracelet caught the light as she reached for her coffee. We've been thinking about how to make everyone comfortable. Marcus shifted in his chair. The leather squeaked softly. He picked up his spoon and stirred coffee that needed no stirring. Around and around, creating small whirlpools that went nowhere. $700 a month, Veronica said. The number dropped onto the table like a stone into still water. Nothing extravagant, but enough for modest dignity. modest dignity. The phrase hung in the perfumed air. Evelyn let the silence stretch. She'd learned in boardrooms that silence made people reveal more than questions ever could. Simone twisted her cloth napkin between her fingers. The expensive fabric wrinkled under pressure. Her breathing had changed, shallow and quick, like a bird sensing danger. "That's very generous," Evelyn said finally. Franklin smiled. "We believe in taking care of family." The waiter returned with additional cream. This time he approached Evelyn directly, but Veronica intercepted with a raised hand. "We'll guide her," Veronica said sweetly. "These French menus can be so confusing." The comment landed with surgical precision. Evelyn had negotiated contracts in 3 languages, but tonight she needed guidance with coffee cream. 700 covers, quite a bit, Franklin continued. He loosened his tie slightly. The silk was hand-painted with tiny golf clubs. Groceries, utilities, maybe some entertainment. Entertainment. As if her life was a small diversion that required funding. Evelyn picked up her coffee cup. The porcelain was bone-thin, probably worth more than her monthly grocery budget. She sipped slowly, buying time to count tells. Veronica's earrings had to be 3 carats each. The woman touched them whenever she made an important point. Franklin's watch was platinum, not gold. His cufflinks matched. Probably a set that cost more than some people's cars. "We stayed at the Ritz in Paris last spring," Veronica was saying. "The concierge there was so helpful. Sometimes you just need someone to navigate for you." Navigate. Another small cut. Evelyn had traveled to 6 continents for business. She'd closed deals in Tokyo boardrooms and London banks. But tonight she needed navigation help. Marcus finally looked up from his coffee. His eyes met hers for exactly 2 seconds before darting away. In those seconds, she saw everything. Shame, guilt, and something else. Relief. Her son was relieved that someone else was handling his problem. "Of course," Franklin added, leaning back in his chair. "This kind of support works best with clear boundaries." Clear boundaries. The real conversation was finally beginning. "What kind of boundaries?" Evelyn asked. Her voice carried no emotion, just professional curiosity. She could have been asking about quarterly projections. Simone's napkin twisting intensified. The fabric made tiny crinkling sounds. Her wedding ring clicked against her water glass as her hand trembled slightly. "Well," Franklin said, glancing at his wife, "young couples need space to build their own traditions." Traditions. Evelyn had started most of Marcus's Christmas traditions. Birthday celebrations. Sunday dinners. 35 years of building memories that were apparently obstacles now. "Less contact with the kids," Franklin said. The words came out matter-of-fact, like discussing weather. The kids. Future grandchildren she'd never hold. Never read to. Never spoil with cookies and bedtime stories. Evelyn set down her coffee cup. The small clink against the saucer seemed loud in the sudden quiet. "I see," she said, but she was seeing much more now. The careful choreography. The rehearsed timing. This wasn't a spontaneous offer. This was a business presentation. "What are the numbers, Hyum?" she asked. Franklin blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The wedding budget. Honeymoon. Down payment on a house." Evelyn's voice stayed level. "I'm curious about the investment you're making in Marcus and Simone's future." Veronica's smile widened. Finally, someone who understood money talk. "55,000 for the wedding," she said. Pride colored her voice like expensive perfume. "All in. Venue, flowers, photographer, everything. 55,000. Almost 7 years of their monthly allowance for her. The math was simple and brutal. "The honeymoon is separate, of course," Veronica continued. 2 weeks in Tuscany. First-class flights. Private villa." She was bragging now. Displaying wealth like a weapon. "And we're helping with the house down payment," Franklin added. "Nothing too extravagant. Maybe $500,000 for something nice." $500,000. Evelyn's entire net worth, given away as pocket change. The restaurant hummed around them. Other tables featured their own quiet dramas. Business deals. Romance. Families celebrating milestones. But their corner table had become an island of calculation. Evelyn opened her small leather tote. The bag was 10 years old, but she'd maintained it carefully. Inside was her phone, reading glasses, and a small notebook. The tools of someone who took notes on important meetings. She closed the tote again without removing anything. The gesture was small but significant, like ending a presentation. "So you're buying silence," she said. The words dropped into the perfumed air like ice cubes into warm wine. The temperature around their table seemed to fall 10 degrees. Marcus's spoon stopped stirring. Simone's napkin twisting ceased. Franklin's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. Only Veronica maintained her smile, but something shifted behind her eyes. A flicker of surprise, perhaps, or respect. That's a rather harsh way to put it, Franklin said. Is it? Evelyn asked. She wasn't angry. Anger was hot and quick and burned itself out. This was something colder and more patient. This was understanding. Simone finally spoke. Mrs. Carter, we just want what's best for everyone. Her voice carried the first crack Evelyn had heard all evening. The marketing polish was wearing thin. What's best? Evelyn repeated. She looked around the table. Marcus, avoiding her eyes. Simone clutching her ruined napkin. Franklin calculating his next move. Veronica still smiling her real estate smile. $700 a month, Evelyn said slowly, in exchange for staying away from my son and future grandchildren. We prefer to think of it as support, Veronica said. Support. The word had been stripped of all meaning. Support was what you gave someone climbing a mountain, not what you paid them to disappear. The waiter approached with the check. Franklin waved him over immediately, eager to regain control through the familiar ritual of paying. But the damage was done. The real conversation had happened. The offer was on the table, naked and ugly in the candlelight. Evelyn stood slowly. Her movements were controlled, dignified. 30 years of board meetings had taught her how to exit gracefully. Thank you for dinner, she said. Her voice carried no sarcasm, no anger, just polite acknowledgement of a transaction completed. Marcus started to stand, but she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Stay, she said. Finish your coffee. She kissed his forehead like she had when he was small. He smelled like expensive cologne now instead of playground dirt, but he was still her son. Mrs. Carter, Simone called as Evelyn turned to leave. Evelyn paused and looked back. Simone's mask had cracked completely now. Underneath was something that might have been shame. We really do want what's best, Simone said. I know you do, Evelyn replied. But her definition of best had just shifted completely. She walked to the elevator with her back straight and her head high. Behind her, the conversation continued in urgent whispers. Damage control was beginning. The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper. Evelyn's reflection looked back at her from the polished steel. A woman in a thrift store dress who had just been offered $700 to disappear from her son's life. The numbers told the story. $55,000 for one day. $500,000 for a house. $700 to make a mother vanish. She'd been priced out of her own family. The elevator descended toward the lobby, carrying her away from the white tablecloths and careful cruelty. But she wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. Evelyn remained standing beside her chair. The elevator could wait. Something in Franklin's smile had triggered a recognition she couldn't ignore. The words he'd used weren't casual dinner conversation. They were technical language she'd heard in boardrooms 30 years ago. Before I go, she said, settling back into her seat, I'm curious about something. Veronica brightened. Finally, the conversation was returning to civilized territory. We love questions, Veronica said. I speak 4 languages, you know. French, Italian, Spanish, and enough German for our wine tours in Austria. The name-dropping continued like expensive perfume being sprayed in the air. Austria, wine tours, private guides. Each detail was another small demonstration of superiority. Franklin leaned back, more comfortable now. Veronica has exquisite taste. We just returned from Tuscany. Private vineyard tour with the family that's been making wine for 6 centuries. 6 centuries. The number was meant to impress. Old money, old traditions, old connections that ordinary people couldn't access. Evelyn nodded politely. She'd heard similar performances from clients who confused spending with sophistication. But underneath the travel stories, she was listening for something else. The house you're helping Marcus and Simone with, she said. How will the title be structured? The question seemed innocent enough. Just practical interest from a future mother-in-law. Franklin's eyes sharpened slightly. Joint tenancy or trust, Evelyn continued. For tax purposes. The words landed differently than she'd expected. Marcus looked confused. Simone glanced quickly at her parents. Franklin's smile grew wider. Trust, he said, worse, much better asset protection. Asset protection. The phrase hung in the air like incense. Evelyn had heard it before, always from people who had more to protect than they wanted to share. Your trust or their? She asked. The question was surgical. Franklin's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. Veronica's hand stilled on her bracelet. Ours, Franklin said finally. For now. Better liability protection while they're young. Young. As if Marcus at 35 needed a financial guardian. Marcus's head turned slowly toward his future father-in-law. Something shifted in his expression. Confusion giving way to understanding, then to something that looked like alarm. Dad, Simone whispered. Her voice carried a warning. But Franklin was enjoying himself now. 1031 exchanges, hard money lending, private placement investments. These things require experience. Each term dropped like breadcrumbs leading deeper into the financial forest. Evelyn recognized the language immediately. She'd seen it used by predatory estate planners who wrapped control in protection. Hard money, she repeated. That's interesting. Franklin mistook her interest for admiration. Most people don't understand sophisticated vehicles. We've been doing this for 20 years. 20 years of practice at financial manipulation disguised as generosity. Veronica touched her earrings again. The gesture was becoming a nervous tic. It's all very boring, really. Just keeping things organized. Organized? Like filing away a son's financial independence in someone else's vault. Marcus was staring at his hands again, but this time his stillness felt different. Not embarrassment, recognition. Temporary, Simone whispered to him. It's just temporary. Temporary. The word parents used to convince children that painful medicine wouldn't last forever. Evelyn was assembling pieces now. The monthly payments to her, the trust-controlled house, the carefully structured isolation from future grandchildren. This wasn't spontaneous generosity. This was systematic acquisition. Money flowing in one direction, control flowing in the other, independence disappearing like morning mist. Excuse me, she said, standing again. Ladies' room. Veronica waved toward the back of the restaurant. Of course, dear. Take your time. The ladies' room was marble and gold, designed to impress wealthy wives while their husbands discussed business. Evelyn stood at the mirror and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found Janet Morrison, former general counsel at a firm that specialized in real estate litigation. They'd worked together on several cases involving predatory lending. The text was short: pull public filings on Hughes RE LLC, Scottsdale area. Need asset structure and lien info. Janet's response came within 30 seconds. Busy night? We'll have something by morning. Evelyn deleted both messages and returned her phone to her purse. 30 years in operations had taught her that information was the most valuable currency in any negotiation. She returned to the table slowly, observing the scene like a returning general, surveying a battlefield. Franklin was talking quietly to Marcus. Simone was checking her phone. Veronica was reapplying lipstick with surgical precision. The conversation stopped when she sat down. Everything all right? Veronica asked. Perfect, Evelyn said. She picked up her coffee cup and took a small sip. The liquid had grown cold, but she didn't mind. Cold things sometimes offered more clarity than warm ones. I was thinking about what you said, she began. About trust and protection. Franklin brightened. Finally, someone who appreciated his expertise. Trust law is fascinating, Evelyn continued. The balance between protection and control. Exactly, Franklin said. Most people don't understand the nuances. Nuances? Like the difference between protecting someone and owning them. In my experience, Evelyn said, her voice soft as silk, the best trusts protect love. The words landed like small hammers on crystal. Franklin's smile flickered. Veronica's hand froze on her coffee cup. Not all trusts do that, Evelyn continued. Some protect other things, like assets, like control, like the power to make grown children dependent on monthly allowances and conditional generosity. Marcus looked up from his hands. For the first time all evening, he was really listening. Love doesn't need much protection, Evelyn said. It grows stronger when it's free. The table went quiet. Even the restaurant noise seemed to recede. Veronica's perfect smile had developed a small crack at one corner. Love that needs contracts and conditions and monthly payments, Evelyn continued, isn't love at all. The words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. Each one created ripples that spread across the white tablecloth. Franklin cleared his throat. That's a rather idealistic view. Is it? Evelyn asked. She wasn't challenging him. She was simply asking a question that none of them could answer honestly. Simone was twisting her napkin again, but now the motion looked desperate. Marcus was staring at her with an expression she hadn't seen since he was 12 years old and had broken her favorite vase. We should probably call it a night, Veronica said. Her voice carried forced brightness, like sunlight through storm clouds. Of course, Evelyn said. She stood for the third time, but now her movements carried different energy. Not retreat, regrouping. Thank you for a lovely evening, she said to the table. And for sharing your thoughts about protection. Protection. She emphasized the word just enough to make it sound like something that needed protection from. Franklin stood and extended his hand. Always a pleasure to meet family. Family. The word had been redefined over the course of the evening. It no longer meant blood or love or shared history. It meant portfolio management. Evelyn shook his hand and felt the weight of his Rolex against her wrist. Heavy, Expensive. Precise. Everything timed and calculated and controlled. "Good night, Marcus," she said to her son. "Take care of yourself." The phrase carried weight beyond its simple words. Take care of yourself, because soon you might be the only one who will. She kissed Simone's cheek and felt the young woman tremble slightly. "Good luck with everything," she whispered. Everything. The house they wouldn't own. The wedding they wouldn't control. The future that was being purchased in monthly installments. The elevator ride down felt different this time. Not defeat. Strategy. By morning, she would know exactly what kind of trust Franklin Hughes used to protect his assets. She would understand the full scope of their financial web. She would see the pattern clearly. But already she understood enough. This wasn't about monthly payments or family dignity or keeping peace between generations. This was about acquisition. And Evelyn Carter had not survived 30 years in corporate America by being anyone's acquired asset. The dinner plates had been cleared away, but the conversation lingered like expensive perfume in stale air. Veronica folded her napkin with surgical precision. Each crease was deliberate, controlled. Her manicured fingers moved like a pianist preparing for a difficult piece. "There's something we should discuss," she said. The words fell softly, but Evelyn felt their weight immediately. This was the moment Veronica had been building toward all evening. The careful setup, the gentle humiliation, the monthly payment offer. All prelude to this. Franklin leaned back in his chair. His Rolex caught the candlelight as he adjusted his cufflinks. The gesture had become his tell throughout the evening. Nervous energy disguised as confidence. "Marcus mentioned some concerns," Veronica continued. Marcus's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. His eyes darted between his mother and his future mother-in-law. The look of a man caught between loyalties he couldn't reconcile. "What kind of concerns?" Evelyn asked. Her voice remained steady, but something shifted in her chest. It tightening, like a knot being pulled slowly tighter. Veronica's smile was surgical. "He worries you might need to move in someday." The words landed like ice water. Move in. As if she was a problem that required housing. A burden that would eventually need managing. Evelyn's hands rested on the white tablecloth. For 30 years, they had signed contracts worth millions. Shaken hands with CEOs. Negotiated deals that made headlines. Tonight, they trembled slightly against the linen. "Retirement healthcare isn't cheap," Franklin added. His voice carried false sympathy, like a banker explaining foreclosure procedures. Healthcare. The great American fear. The sword hanging over every retiree's head. They'd found her vulnerable spot and pressed hard. Marcus was staring at his hands again. His silence cut deeper than any words could have. This was her son, the boy she'd raised alone after his father died. The child she'd worked double shifts to support through college. His silence was permission for this moment. "Mom meant well," Simone whispered. But she didn't stop it. The words hung there like tissue paper, fragile and useless. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. Not anger, not even hurt. Something colder and more final. The sound a bone makes when it breaks cleanly. Veronica reached into her designer purse and withdrew a small brochure. The paper was glossy, expensive. Marketing materials for something called Sunset Manor. The name was printed in cheerful gold letters above a photo of smiling elderly people playing cards. "Independent living options," Veronica said, sliding the brochure across the table. "Just thinking ahead. Thinking ahead. Planning for Evelyn's decline like a business expense." The brochure lay on the white tablecloth like evidence in a criminal trial. Evelyn picked it up with fingers that felt disconnected from her body. The paper was warm from Veronica's purse. Inside were photos of small apartments, communal dining rooms, scheduled activities, a life measured out in medication times and meal schedules. "Very thoughtful," she said. The words came from somewhere outside herself. Professional politeness operating on autopilot while her core self recoiled. Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were red around the edges. "Mom, nobody's saying you have to—" "Of course not," Franklin interrupted smoothly. "It's just good to have options." Options. Like choosing between different methods of surrender. Evelyn stood slowly. The chair legs scraped against the polished floor with a sound like fingernails on glass. Every eye in their corner of the restaurant turned toward the noise. "I should go," she said. But as she stepped away from the table, the maître d' appeared beside her like a well-dressed shadow. His smile was apologetic but firm. "Madam, the check is still pending." Pending. She was trapped by a dinner bill like a customer who'd forgotten her wallet. The humiliation sharpened, bright and clean as a surgical knife. Other diners were watching now. Discreet glances over wine glasses and whispered conversations. She was becoming dinner theater for people who could afford to pay their own checks. Franklin fumbled for his platinum card. His movements were too quick, too obvious. Veronica's smile had frozen at the edges. They hadn't planned for this moment of public attention. Evelyn sat back down. The chair felt different now. Not furniture, but a witness stand. She placed her hands flat on the table and looked directly at Veronica. The brochure lay between them like a challenge. Fine, Evelyn said. Let's speak plainly. Her voice carried a new quality. Not the polite dinner conversation tone she'd maintained all evening. This was her boardroom voice. The one that had closed deals and ended careers. The candle flame flickered between them, casting moving shadows across the expensive china. The restaurant noise seemed to fade, as if the world was holding its breath. Veronica's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her wine glass. Franklin's card lay on the table, still waiting for the server to return. I've been watching you perform all evening, Evelyn continued. The careful insults, the financial displays, the systematic humiliation. Each word was measured, precise. Like reading from a contract that couldn't be broken. Marcus's breathing had changed. Quick and shallow, like someone witnessing an accident in slow motion. You want to buy my absence for $700 a month, Evelyn said, while spending $55,000 on one day of celebration? The math hung in the air like an equation that couldn't be solved. You want to control my son's house through your trust, limit my contact with future grandchildren, ship me off to independent living when I become inconvenient. Simone's face had gone pale. Her marketing smile had completely disappeared. You've made one mistake, Evelyn said. The words came quietly, but they carried the weight of 30 years in corporate America. You assumed I was powerless. The server appeared with Franklin's decline card. He set it down discreetly, professional embarrassment in every gesture. Franklin's face flushed red above his expensive collar. Veronica reached for her purse, but her movements were too quick. Desperate. The perfect composure was cracking like expensive makeup in hot weather. Security freeze, she muttered to no one in particular. Evelyn watched it all with the detached interest of someone studying a laboratory experiment. The careful choreography was falling apart. The performance was ending badly for the performers. She opened her small leather tote and withdrew her own credit card. 10 years old but carefully maintained. Like everything else in her life. I'll handle this, she said to the hovering server. The man looked relieved. Rich people's money problems were not his department. As he walked away with her card, Evelyn folded her hands on the table and looked at each person in turn. Marcus, shamefaced and silent. Simone, clutching her ruined napkin. Franklin, checking his phone for banking apps. Veronica, staring at the table like it contained important messages. The power had shifted completely. Thank you for a very educational evening, Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, as if they'd been discussing the weather instead of dismantling her dignity piece by piece. The server returned with her card and a small smile of gratitude. She signed the check with steady hands and left a 20% tip. Professional courtesy, even in warfare. Good night, she said to the table. But she didn't stand to leave. Not yet. There was more work to be done. The restaurant noise faded around Evelyn as she sat perfectly still. Her credit card lay on the white tablecloth like a small declaration of independence. But her mind had traveled elsewhere. Back to a different time, a different kind of table. She was 24 again, sitting in a studio apartment on Chicago's South Side. The table was secondhand Formica, scarred and yellow with age. Marcus slept in a crib nearby, his breathing soft and even in the darkness. She'd spread her community college textbooks across that table every night after her receptionist shift ended. Contract law, business accounting, operations management. The words swam together under the cheap lamp, but she'd pressed on. Because knowledge was the only currency that couldn't be taken away. The memory shifted. Now she was 30, standing in a corporate break room at 6 in the morning, learning about supplier negotiations from a plant manager who took pity on the young single mother. He taught her to read between the lines of contracts, to spot the hidden clauses that could destroy businesses. Never sign anything you don't understand, he'd said, and never trust anyone who pressures you to sign quickly. She'd carried those words through every promotion. Receptionist to analyst, analyst to scheduler, scheduler to manager. Each step earned through late nights and early mornings, through studying while Marcus did homework at the kitchen table. By 40, she was running operations for a logistics company that shipped goods across 3 states. She'd learned to maximize 401k contributions, to buy index funds instead of individual stocks. Wealth whispers, she'd taught herself. Insecurity shouts. The memory warmed her. She'd driven a 10-year-old Corolla to million-dollar meetings. lived in the same modest condo for 15 years while colleagues bought houses they couldn't afford. She'd watched executives crash and burn because they confused spending with success. When Robert died suddenly at 43, she'd faced the medical billing maze alone. Insurance companies that denied claims, doctors who demanded payment up front. The system designed to bankrupt the vulnerable. But she'd learned to fight, to document everything, to demand itemized bills and challenge every charge, to build networks of vendors, lawyers, and contacts who owed her favors. Quiet power accumulated over decades. She'd never weaponized money, never used it to control or manipulate. When Marcus struggled in his early career, she'd helped with grocery money and job referrals. But she'd never made him dependent, never created strings that could be pulled. The restaurant came back into focus. The white tablecloth, the expensive china, the people who'd spent the evening trying to buy her compliance. But they'd misunderstood everything about her. She wasn't a burden waiting to happen. She was a woman who'd built her own security brick by brick, who'd learned crisis management in corporate boardrooms and applied it to her own life. The medical bills they'd threatened her with, she had long-term care insurance and a health savings account maxed out for 15 years. The housing they'd offered to control, she owned her condo outright and had enough savings to upgrade or downsize as needed. Most importantly, she learned something they'd never understand. True wealth wasn't about controlling others. It was about protecting your own freedom to choose. She looked at Marcus, still avoiding her eyes. Her shy, brilliant son who'd forgotten where he came from, who'd let himself be convinced that his mother was a financial liability instead of the woman who'd taught him everything he knew about perseverance. She looked at Simone, twisted with guilt and confusion. A young woman trapped between love and money, unable to see that the choice was false. Finally, she looked at Franklin and Veronica, people who'd confused having money with understanding it, who'd built their wealth on leverage and debt instead of patience and discipline. They thought they were buying her silence for $700 a month. They had no idea what they were actually purchasing. Evelyn straightened in her chair and smiled. The expression was genuine now, not the polite mask she'd worn all evening. "There's something you should know," she said. Her voice carried a new quality. Not anger, not hurt, confidence. The kind that came from building something real instead of borrowing someone else's dream. Evelyn reached into her leather tote and withdrew a slim manila folder. The paper was crisp, recently printed. She placed it on the white tablecloth beside the abandoned dessert plates with the precision of someone presenting evidence. "I still clear mid-five figures monthly on retainer work," she said. The number dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Franklin's hand paused halfway to his water glass. Veronica's perfect smile flickered at the edges. "Consulting pays well when you know how to read contracts," Evelyn continued. She opened the folder with deliberate care, especially when you understand what to look for. The papers inside were organized with military precision. Public records, financial filings, corporate documents, each page stamped with official seals and dated within the past 24 hours. "Hughes Real Estate LLC," she read aloud. "Interesting structure you have there." Franklin's breathing changed, quick and shallow. His platinum card still lay declined on the table, a small monument to financial embarrassment. "Balloon debt payments due in 18 months, Evelyn continued, scanning the documents. "Pending liens from 3 different contractors. And what's this? A foreclosure notice on your Scottsdale office building?" Veronica's wineglass trembled slightly in her hand. Red liquid sloshed against the crystal like blood against a window. "Those are private matters," Franklin said. His voice carried forced authority, but the power had already shifted. "Public records," Evelyn replied. "Available to anyone who knows where to look." She turned a page with the same care she'd once used to review merger documents. Each movement was deliberate, designed to build tension. "The interesting part is the timing," she said. "Your offers to help Marcus and Simone coincide perfectly with your cash flow problems." Marcus was staring at the documents like they contained his own death sentence. His face had gone pale above his expensive shirt. The server appeared with coffee refills, but the table had become a battlefield. He retreated quickly, recognizing the signs of family warfare. "You're using their wedding expenses to shore up your business losses," Evelyn said. "The house trust isn't protection. It's collateral." Simone's napkin fell from nerveless fingers. "Dad, tell me that's not true." But Franklin couldn't meet his daughter's eyes. His hands were shaking now, all pretense of control abandoned. Veronica tried to rally. "These are complex financial instruments. You wouldn't understand." "I understand leverage," Evelyn interrupted. "I understand debt-to-equity ratios. I understand what happens when someone borrows against their children's future." She turned another page. The sound was sharp in the expensive air. Your house in Scottsdale has a second mortgage. Your cars are leased. Your country club membership is 3 months behind. Each fact landed like a small explosion. You're not wealthy. You're leveraged. The check arrived on a silver tray. The server set it down carefully and retreated like a diplomat leaving a war zone. Franklin reached for his wallet with movements that had lost all confidence. His platinum card emerged like a white flag of surrender. The server returned within minutes. His expression was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, sir." The card was declined. Decline. The word hung in the perfumed air like smoke from a crashed airplane. Franklin fumbled for another card. This one was regular silver, not platinum. The demotion was visible and immediate. "Try this one," he said. The server disappeared again. Franklin's breathing had become audible. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the restaurant's careful climate control. "Security freeze," Veronica whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. She was explaining to herself more than anyone else. The server returned with the same apologetic expression. "I'm sorry." This one was also declined. 2 cards, 2 failures. The mathematical progression of financial collapse. Evelyn pulled out her own credit card. 10 years old but meticulously maintained. Like everything else in her carefully managed life. "Allow me," she said to the server. "Split it 3 ways, please." The instruction was clear. 3 separate checks. 3 separate responsibilities. No more shared burdens or hidden subsidies. "Actually," she continued, "I'll take care of the entire bill." The gesture was surgical in its precision. Total financial dominance wrapped in gracious politeness. "You tried to buy my absence for $700, she said as the server processed her payment. "I'll buy your dinner for free. Consider it a lesson." Her card went through immediately. No security freezes. No declined authorizations. Just smooth, efficient financial competence. She turned back to the documents while they waited for the receipt. "The house you're putting in trust for Marcus and Simone has reversion triggers tied to divorce proceedings. If their marriage fails, ownership reverts to you." Marcus's head snapped up. "What?" "You tied our home to submission," he said, his voice carrying the weight of complete understanding. The son she'd raised was finally seeing clearly. The boy who'd learned to read between the lines was applying those skills to his own life. "You made our marriage a business arrangement," he continued. "Success means you keep control. Failure means you keep the house." Simone's face crumpled. "Mom, stop." "Just stop." But Veronica couldn't stop. The machinery of financial manipulation had been exposed, and all the gears were visible now. "It's protection," Veronica said weakly. "Asset protection." "It's control," Marcus replied. "Pure and simple." The server returned with Evelyn's receipt. She signed it with steady hands and left a 20% tip. Professional courtesy, even in the middle of warfare. "Thank you for a very educational evening," she said. But she remained seated. The folder still lay open on the table. More pages waited to be turned. Franklin and Veronica Hughes had built their empire on borrowed money and borrowed time. They'd tried to purchase a family through carefully structured debt. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the woman who taught Marcus everything he knew about building something real. The next morning arrived with the kind of clarity that follows a storm. Evelyn sat in her modest kitchen, laptop open on the small table where she'd once helped Marcus with homework. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, illuminating the simple space she'd called home for 15 years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Can we talk, all of us?" She'd been expecting this. The previous evening had torn away carefully constructed facades. Now came the harder work of rebuilding on honest foundations. At 10 o'clock, her laptop screen filled with familiar faces. Marcus called from his apartment, looking older than his 35 years. Simone sat beside him, her marketing polish replaced by something more authentic. And there was David Chen, the real estate attorney she worked with on corporate acquisitions. His presence was her contribution to this conversation. "Before we begin," Evelyn said, "I want everyone to understand something. Last night wasn't about winning. It was about clarity." Marcus shifted in his chair. The weight of his parents-in-law's deception was visible on his shoulders. "Mom," he began, then stopped. The word carried too much history, too much guilt. "Let me start," Evelyn said. "I'm sorry you were put in that position. Nobody should have to choose between love and money." Simone spoke for the first time. "I didn't know about the reversion clauses, the business problems. My parents told me it was standard protection." Standard protection. The phrase still carried the sting of manipulation. David Chen adjusted his glasses and opened a legal pad. "Let's discuss what's possible going forward. The house trust can be modified or dissolved with all parties' consent. I want it dissolved, Marcus said immediately. We'll buy the house ourselves, whatever it takes. The determination in his voice reminded Evelyn of the boy who'd insisted on paying for his own college textbooks. Pride and independence weren't always convenient, but they were honest. That's one option, David continued. We can also restructure as a joint trust with you two as trustees. Independent management. No reversion clauses. Simone was taking notes on a yellow pad. Her handwriting was careful, precise. What about the other help? The wedding expenses? The question hung in the air like smoke. How do you unwind financial gifts that came with invisible strings? Written boundaries, Evelyn said. Clear agreements about expectations and obligations. No more assumptions or implications. David nodded approvingly. Financial boundary agreements are standard practice. Everything documented, nothing left to interpretation. They spent the next hour mapping out details. Legal language for emotional problems. Documents to protect hearts as much as assets. Marcus apologized twice during the call. His voice carried shame that would take time to heal. I should have asked more questions. I should have protected you. You were trying to keep everyone happy, Evelyn replied. That's impossible when people have competing agendas. Simone made a decision that surprised everyone. We pause all financial help from my parents until these boundaries are in place and honored. The words came out steady and clear. A young woman choosing her marriage over her parents' money. Are you sure? Marcus asked. I'm sure. We'll pay for our own wedding, buy our own house, build our own life. The call ended with action items and deadlines. David would draft the necessary documents. Marcus and Simone would meet with their own financial advisor. Evelyn would review everything before signatures. Professional competence applied to personal problems. After the call ended, Evelyn opened her filing cabinet and withdrew forms she'd been meaning to complete for months. Healthcare power of attorney, living will, advance directives. She'd been modeling autonomy without realizing it. Now she would document it legally. Her phone buzzed with a text from Simone. Can you recommend a budgeting template? We want to do this right. Evelyn smiled and forwarded a spreadsheet she'd perfected over 30 years. Simple columns for income, expenses, savings. Nothing complicated but thorough. Another text arrived an hour later. Would you like to join our Women in Operations mentorship circle? We meet monthly. The invitation was unexpected but welcome. Sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. Building networks instead of burning bridges. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was from Veronica, reconsidering our will. Hope you're satisfied. Threats disguised as information. Evelyn read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Silence was sometimes the most powerful response. The afternoon was spent in David's office, reviewing documents and signing papers. Legal language that protected everyone's interests without controlling anyone's choices. At 4 o'clock, David called the recorder's office. We'll have the new deed by Friday, he reported. Clean title, joint ownership, no encumbrances. Clean title. The phrase had a beautiful simplicity. Ownership without conditions. Love without leverage. That evening, Marcus and Simone came for dinner. Not at an expensive restaurant with white tablecloths and hidden agendas. At Evelyn's kitchen table with takeout Chinese food and honest conversation. I have something for you, Simone said, pulling a small box from her purse. Inside were Veronica's spare keys to their apartment. I thought you should see me return them, Simone said. The gesture was symbolic but important. Physical separation of financial strings. Keep the engagement ring, Evelyn said. It's yours now. Not theirs. Simone smiled for the first time in days. I love Marcus, not their money. Good, Nemmer, Evelyn replied. Money should serve love, not the other way around. They ate off mismatched plates and drank wine from coffee mugs. The table was small, the food was simple, but the conversation was free. No price tags on affection. No contracts governing kindness. No monthly payments for the privilege of being family. Outside, Chicago hummed with its evening energy. People heading home from work, couples walking hand in hand, families gathering around their own tables. The new order had been established, not through threats or ultimatums, but through clarity and choice. As they cleared the dishes, Marcus fixed Evelyn's leaky faucet. A reversal of roles that felt natural and right, taking care of each other without keeping score. Thank you, he said as he packed up his tools. For what? For teaching me the difference between generosity and control. The lesson had been expensive for everyone involved. But some education couldn't be purchased with monthly payments or trust fund manipulations. It had to be earned through honesty and lived through choice. 3 months later, Evelyn's kitchen had become the center of something she hadn't planned, but deeply cherished. Sunday evening chili nights had replaced expensive restaurant dinners. The small table that had once held homework and college applications now hosted a different kind of education. Marcus stood at the stove, stirring a pot that filled the apartment with the smell of cumin and warmth. His sleeves were rolled up, his expensive watch set aside on the counter. Simone chopped onions with the focused intensity of someone learning a new skill. More paprika, Evelyn suggested from her chair. It needs depth, not just heat. The kitchen was too small for 3 adults, but nobody minded the crowding. Laughter had replaced price tags as the evening's currency. Simone had returned her mother's spare keys 3 weeks ago. The gesture had been filmed on her phone and sent to Veronica with a simple message. Thank you for everything, but we're building our own life now. No anger. No ultimatums. Just clear boundaries expressed with quiet dignity. The wedding planning had shifted completely. Instead of a $55,000 production, they were planning a celebration in Lincoln Park. 60 guests instead of 300. A food truck instead of a country club catering hall. It feels like us, Simone had explained. Not like someone else's idea of what we should want. Evelyn had volunteered at the senior legal clinic every Tuesday for 2 months now. Her desk was in a windowless room that smelled like old coffee and determination. The work involved untangling predatory contracts that trapped elderly people in financial quicksand. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd escaped her own financial manipulation only to spend her retirement helping others do the same. Trust law is fascinating, she told her supervisor. The difference between protection and control. The clinic's bulletin board displayed a small announcement. Trusts that protect people, not control them. Workshop by Evelyn Carter, Thursdays at 2 p.m. The workshops drew 12 to 15 people each week. Seniors who'd been pressured into signing documents they didn't understand. Adult children worried about protecting parents from financial predators. Ordinary people learning to recognize the language of manipulation. Evelyn had kept everything simple in her own life. The same modest condo, the same 10-year-old Honda, the same bus route to the lake for her morning walks. But she'd upgraded her knowledge. Financial planning courses, estate law seminars, volunteer training that sharpened skills she'd developed over 30 years. Her retirement account remained untouched. Her consulting work continued to provide more income than she spent. The difference went to a fund she was quietly building for future grandchildren. Not a trust with reversion clauses, but a simple savings account with their names on it. Money for education, not manipulation. Resources for opportunity, not control. The dinner was ready. They gathered around the small table with mismatched bowls and cloth napkins that had seen better days. The conversation flowed like good wine, covering everything from Marcus's latest software project to Simone's career plans. Holidays would still be complicated. Veronica and Franklin had stopped responding to invitations, but they hadn't disappeared entirely. Simone received occasional texts about family gatherings and financial opportunities. Each message was politely declined. It gets easier, Evelyn had assured her. Setting boundaries is like building muscle. It gets stronger with practice. A postcard had arrived the previous week. A picture of the Chicago skyline with a simple message on the back. Thank you for teaching me quiet power. Yes, sono. Quiet power. The phrase had stayed with Evelyn for days. She'd never thought of her approach in those terms, but it fit. Strength that didn't need to announce itself. Influence that operated through competence rather than coercion. After dinner, they worked together to clear the dishes. 3 generations moving around the small kitchen with practiced efficiency. Marcus washed, Simone dried, Evelyn put away. A simple choreography that felt like family. I fixed the faucet in the bathroom too, Marcus mentioned as he scrubbed the chili pot. That drip was keeping you awake. The role reversal felt natural now. Taking care of each other without keeping score. Helping without creating dependence. Your father would have liked this, Evelyn said quietly. Marcus paused in his washing. What would he have liked? Sunday dinners. You taking care of things around the house. Building something real instead of borrowing someone else's vision. Robert had died before seeing his son become a man. But he would have recognized the values Marcus was finally embracing. Work over wealth. Character over capital. Love over leverage. The evening wound down with coffee and conversation. Simone showed them pictures from a networking event for young professionals. Marcus described a challenging project at work. Evelyn shared stories from the legal clinic. Ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they were chosen freely. As they prepared to leave, Simone hugged Evelyn goodbye. Same time next week? Same time, Evelyn confirmed. After they left, she sat in her quiet kitchen and looked out the window at the city lights. Chicago sparkled in the darkness, Millions of lives pursuing their own versions of success and happiness. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Thanks for dinner. Thanks for everything. She typed back, money's job is freedom, not obedience. The message was delivered immediately. A small philosophy lesson wrapped in a simple text. Evelyn turned off the lights and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new consulting projects, new workshop participants, new opportunities to share what she'd learned about building wealth that whispered instead of shouted. But tonight, she fell asleep thinking about 3 hands stacking bowls at her kitchen sink. Soft, ordinary, and completely right. The kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in monthly payments or trust fund statements. The kind that grew stronger when it was shared freely instead of controlled carefully. The kind that would outlast any platinum credit card or country club membership. The kind that